Hello and welcome to the Power Pod. I'm your host, Matthew Cohen, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming back onto the show Adelle Nazarian, an esteemed journalist, media personality, and Middle East expert. Adele, great to see you again. How are you?
Great. Thank you. It's great to be on with you, Matthew. And a lot has obviously transpired and changed in the global dynamic since we last spoke.
Indeed, it has, especially in the Middle East and South Africa as well. So, since the last time we saw each other, I think there's a lot for us to unpack. But
Oh, yeah.
I'd really like to start specifically on what's going on in the Middle East, but specifically from the South African perspective. So, at the time of recording, we've now seen the Iran US ceasefire come into effect. Of course, that can all change by the time that the interview is released, obviously, because of how quick everything changes out there. But specifically with regards to South Africa, we've seen how the ANC, who is leading the coalition government, has continuously supported Iran throughout this entire war. We're seeing how even as Iran seems to be losing and the US and Israel makes grounds, and I mean, pretty much the whole West views the Islamic Republic as a pariah, the ANC has just remained loyal to them throughout. So many people are saying this is because of money, but Adele, as an expert on the sort of subject matter, what is your take? Why is it that the ANC is just so obsessed with, the Ayatollah's regime?
So, you know, the ANC's loyalty isn't just about modern day realpolitik. It's deeply rooted in historical reciprocity. And you can't solve a problem if you're too afraid to look at, which is why I wanted to start off wearing these rose colored lenses and then take them off so we can see reality. So I want the audience to see reality here, just like I'm seeing reality, right? You can't change the truth. Even if
Sure.
you put something over your eyes. So it's a
I was
very
wondering why you started off like that.
maybe I shouldn't back on. No, it's all good. Thank you. So it wasn't just a fashion statement. Um, it's a really complex and fascinating geopolitical moment that we're in, right? And you have to look really at the ANC's loyal to the end kind of, positioning with regards to Iran. It really goes back to the debut of 1979, before even the Islamic Revolution. The Shah of Iran, he was a major backer of Africa's then, apartheid government, but doesn't mean he agreed with it. It was just that he was continuing to maintain diplomatic and commerce economic ties, providing oil, maintaining close ties. Then when Ayatollah Khomeini took over in 79, he immediately cut all ties with Pretoria. Khomeini did, and he branded the apartheid state as illegitimate and supported the liberation movement. The ANC has a very long memory regarding who stood by them during their exile, but obviously things have changed. You fast forwarded a little bit. There's, the anti-imperialistic alignment, right? The ANC obviously views the West pressure on Iran through a global South versus West kind of lens. And supporting Iran is a way for the ANC to assert its own independence from Western foreign policy perspective, and basically, it often sees it as being hypocritical or neo-colonial. You have energy and BRICS, Iran's entry into BRICS, obviously. With that, the relationship has obviously shifted from revolutionary solidarity to a more formalized economic partnership. And and you have to also look at, honestly, people don't really realize, but there's a lot there's a lot that ties in. I don't know if your viewers are familiar with this, but it was actually during the Shah's time, 1976, during the infamous 60 Minutes interview, which I actually do attribute in a great deal to his ultimate demise and removal. It's when he claimed that the Jewish lobby in the US exercised disproportionate amount of power over American policy. He even said that the lobby was, quote, stronger than the president of the United States, the Jewish lobby, right?
Wow.
And this is well documented, and I think that's also the reason why the ANC, specifically in South Africa, they have a strong, kind of tie and loyalty to Iran to this day. And it has to do with the fact that you can see South Africa is so vehemently against Israel. And these are some of the Israel policy. And, I always say this. First of all, there's a reasoning behind it, right? Late Shah of Iran's comments were driven by a mix of political frustration and his own worldview, where he was the architect, frankly, of high oil prices in OPEC. And now we see an interesting, scenario with the Strait of Hormuz. And I don't know if you've been following this, but despite the ceasefire, which you opened up with, which I think is going to be very short-lived, frankly, and I see Pakistan as kind of the available, convenient option. I think it's purely transactional. Pakistan is brilliant by no standard, and it's not anything other than they were just available and convenient. And
Right,
kind of like,
because they mediated the ceasefire agreement.
yeah, they didn't even really mediate it. It was more like they were put in place to kind of take whatever was given to them and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. And by the way, Pakistan ended up giving two different versions, one to Tehran and one to Washington, about the agreed upon, let's say, temporary ceasefire things. It's so disingenuous, and why, unfortunately, at the end of the day, that government can't be trusted. But you have to look at the fact that now they're going to the Strait of Hormuz. I think Iran had reached some kind of an agreement to start imposing up to a minimum, I think, of $2 million on each vessel passing through the Strait of Hormuz. And it was free back then. Yeah, it was free, but it was free before this. And now you have this, which I believe personally is an attempt to keep oil prices high. I think, and I've said this, Matthew, I'll say it again, nothing conspiratorial about it. It's just my own analysis of what I see happening. I don't think we're in the midst of World War III. I think what we're doing is laying the groundwork for 2028, the start of World War III. But not World War III in the way that we perceived it during the first two world wars. It's going to be a battle for who is going to have control over the weaponry of the future, land, resources, that's what it's about, and cyber warfare. And frankly, I just I don't see the global economy improving. So that's kind of where I see the South African government's, loyalty to the ANC's loyalty to Iran, despite the ebbs and flows even today of the political ideological framework. I think it has to do with really the history of where it all started. You have to look at it very deeply to understand that their hatred for, I think, Israel is stronger. Like, if Israel wasn't there, I don't necessarily know that there would be the same kind of, camaraderie, so to speak, between the two countries. To be honest with you, I think it comes
That's
down.
interesting. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Adele.
No, it's okay. I was going to say, I don't think if Israel, I think if Israel didn't exist, there wouldn't be this kind of camaraderie between them. And I even posted on my social media. I said, the people who view Israel as a bigger, who hate Israel more than they want freedom for Iran, a free Iran, are the problem. And you should see the kind of vitriol that has been coming, as a response to this. And they keep saying, no, Israel equals no problems. And I'm like, this is where everyone is so brainwashed who believes this. If Israel was removed from the global equation, okay, God forbid, I don't think it's never going to happen, obviously, but if it was, I guarantee you, not only would there be no peace, there would be a far worse situation than we're currently facing on a global scale. It's like, pick your poison. Pick your poison, right?
Right. It's an interesting point that you made on oil, because from what I understand, you're saying, so Iran's sort of trying to control entry into the Strait of Hormuz and charge these toll fees to vessels. I know you said about $2 million each, which is quite high. But something that's really interesting to me, Adele, is whether or not the ANC maybe views that as an advantage to them, because I did hear Iranian representatives say, no, when it comes to South Africa, we are happy to allow the vessels through. It's just the Western vessels and the Israel-aligned vessels that we want to keep out. So I think what you said about that is very interesting to me. But even beyond, just the ANC's interest in Iran, we've also seen this new interest of Iran in South Africa. A couple of days ago, we've seen not only how the Iranian embassy has been very vocal on social media, but there was even a move by the ANC to have its members go to the Iranian embassy and sign a condolence book and wish their
Yes.
condolences to members. They're like straight after the war
Yep.
started. And I mean, it was all saying, oh, we're mourning the death of Ali Khamenei. But then at the same time, we also saw something else, which is how in the University of Pretoria, they hosted an Iranian led lecture on political science, and it was people from the government. So I don't know why. Why do you think it is that Iran has taken this massive interest in South Africa of all places?
Well, Iran is obsessed with South Africa because it views it as a diplomatic anchor in the Southern Hemisphere. It's like the gateway strategy, right? Like you just mentioned about the lecture. South Africa is the most sophisticated economy, I would say. Kenya's kind of catching up, but in Africa and a leader in the African Union. By securing, South Africa's support, Iran gains kind of a moral shield in international forums like the UN. And that makes it harder for the West to paint them as totally isolated, which is why, why they're doing this partially. And it has to do with
Mm,
soft power infiltration, right? The lectures at the University of Pretoria, and the condolence book that you mentioned. It's classic public diplomacy. Iran is basically targeting South Africa's youth and academic elite, building a grassroots resistance narrative similar to their strategies in other parts of the world, like in Venezuela, like in Colombia. You have FARC. You have all. It's a very soft power infiltration strategy, and I think that's what it has to do. They're looking for whatever angle they can get in, and present themselves as being a moral authority, moral shield. It's very funny. I even see, for example, these comparisons floating around social media where there was like, I don't know if it's AI generated, I think it's real, but that Jesus is viewed as a prophet in the Quran. And so there's a picture of, in this one that runs subwaves, Jesus, and like there's people cleaning it. That doesn't surprise me, but it's very interesting how this double standard also exists, where you can have Jesus there as a prophet, yet in the Islamic Republic, converting to Christianity from Islam is a blasphemous, you know, uh, basically prohibition that's punishable by death. So it's
right.
just a crazy double standard, and it's all about, as I said, soft power and the appearance and the moral shield that they try to present with themselves with, to cover themselves with in front of the international community. I think that's what it comes down to.
Well, so it's really interesting that you bring that up. So you sort of had the post of Jesus where on the surface they're trying to show themselves off as presentable, whereas underneath the surface, if you want to convert to Christianity, punishable by death. But then it's like almost like in South Africa, they're trying to basically show how, oh, Iran's not this terrible place. We want to be friendly with South Africa. And it's almost as if South Africa, the friendship with South Africa and others almost makes them appear more palatable to the
Yeah.
rest of the world and not so much as a pariah. Is that more or less
Well, can I tell you?
what you would say is the
Absolutely.
case?
Absolutely. They're giving this false perception. Like, for example, what I was referring to, it's called the Holy Mary in Mariam Mogadas metro station in Tehran. It opened in late 2025 on line 6, okay? And it features the, artistic reliefs of Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary. It's exactly what it is. And it's located near the Armenia St. Sarkis Cathedral. And so this is what it is. I mean, it's so amazing to me how it's allowed that they will present themselves as being accompanying to Christians and Christianity, accommodating to it. But if any Muslim decides to leave the faith, they're an apostate and should be hung by the cranes or stoned, or it's just crazy. I mean, look,
Wow.
Matthew, we both know there's a lot of misinformation that comes out to the media, right? But at the end of the day, you have to verify everything, especially with Western media. I have a lot of people come to me trying to correct the record with Western media, and I will always get the truth and present it, right? But you have to, at the end of the day, you have to question if what's being said is actually enough people coming around and complaining. It isn't a lie. You can't say that it's, if 1,000, 2,000 people are coming forward and basically saying that this is what happened to my family, to people who are, Christian or left Islamic faith, Muslim faith, then this isn't just a media propaganda, exercise. It's reality.
Of course. And I think that's what kind of makes it almost more frightening than, a regular physical hot war, because when it comes to, the war that we see unfolding, yes, of course, that is very important and it is absolutely crucial. Whoever does emerge victorious, that will change the course of history, right? But then at the same time, what I think a lot of people are not seeing is the sort of soft power that you mentioned. And I think that's what makes it so dangerous, is the fact that it goes undetected, the sort of infiltration of education systems, infiltrative soft power diplomacy. And just on that note, I guess my big question then is, when we piece together all these parts of the puzzle, so these diplomatic ties and South African politicians visiting Tehran and the Strait of Hormuz, the university lectures, is there maybe a deeper agenda that the Islamic regime has for South Africa?
Well, yes, I do think that if, for example, the regime falls in Iran, the Islamic Republic, then South Africa has to do a pivot from being ideologically loyal to pragmatically neutral. And they're going to have to quickly repair its ties with the West, um, in terms of trade, to ensure economic stability. But if it continues, then of course Iran. Look, here's the biggest thing that I think most people are maybe missing, or they are very well aware of. I know you're aware of it, but for the audience, it's important that they know that whatever happens in Tehran, Turkey, for example, Turkey, which is obviously Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's the president of Turkey. He is, and I love Turkey. It's a beautiful country. I've been there a few times. Um, he does have the view that he wants Turkey to be the leader of the Muslim caliphate throughout the world. And they strategically do need Tehran to continue being an Islamic Republic, because that will help them expand throughout that region, redrawing the map of what was before the Great Persian Empire, the Turkish, Empire, Ataturk and whatnot before him. And that's precisely what they're trying to do. And so Iran itself understands also the importance of Turkey and other allies like that in terms of pushing its aligned agenda, which is to see the expansion of the Islamic Republic throughout the world. And so I think going to places like South Africa, going to other countries like, you see what they did in the UAE, for example. They were able to invest there heavily, but investing heavily doesn't mean that you can go and bomb your neighbors, no matter how many billions you invested, and through soft
Sure.
power investments, and not face the consequences. And Iranians have basically, the Iranian hospital was shut down in the UAE, which is the best hospital probably in terms of the medical care you can get. Honestly, the brilliant minds, and this is the consequence. So yeah, Iran's using South Africa as a tool for its long-term strategy and vision to get in where it can, and I think that if and once this regime goes away and is replaced, uh, it, well, there's going to be a whole. Basically, if that happens, which I don't think is on the agenda of the United States, to be honest with you, much to the chagrin of the Iranian diaspora everywhere in the world. But should it occur, then Iran will open itself up to having renewed relations with the West, and it will allow for a amazingly unprecedented time of prosperity for the Iranian people and for the world. But then again, I don't know if it's that's looking at through a rose-colored lens. No, no, I'm joking. I think that's a realistic outcome, and it's just a matter of whether or not America has the bravery to help the people of Iran actually get themselves armed, for example, and to fight a symmetric, not an asymmetric fight, because you can't have people in the streets trying to take back their country, right? in a way that they have a say while using flesh against the bullets. It's asymmetrical
Of course.
warfare. It's asymmetrical, and it just isn't going to work. So we'll see how this all unfolds. But Iran is definitely holding on to, the Islamic Republic of Iran is holding on to whatever alliances it can. South Africa, and by the way, Matthew, one more thing: South Africa will bleed into other parts of Africa. It's mineral and rare earth element heavy. Iran is full of lithium. I mean, can you imagine like what China's doing? This is where the new frontier is going to be, rare earths. And
Right.
there's a lot more underneath the surface as to why
It's
they're
a
doing
very
this.
interesting picture you paint there, Adele, and you've actually got me thinking. So I'd like to paint two scenarios based off what you've said. Okay. So, scenario one, we see the war unfold, and for whatever specific reason, the regime remains intact. Scenario two is if the regime falls. Now, speaking about scenario one, I have a question for you about border security and immigration. So, in South Africa, I don't know if this is a story you heard of, but late last year, there were two emergency flights that arrived in South Africa carrying people from Gaza. And for whatever crazy reason, border security said, well, these people, a lot of them, they didn't have their passports stamped, which, I mean, Israel doesn't stamp their passports because that's the airport they came from. But they also, a lot of them had documentation problems. They were kept on the flights for a very long time. I think they weren't allowed to disembark for like maybe even 10 hours, if I remember correctly. And then the craziest thing happened. The president, Cyril Ramaphosa, gets on the news and says, these flights mysteriously landed in South Africa. We don't know where they're from. Yet even with that, the border authority decided to let everybody into the country. And a few weeks ago, it was announced that over, I think, 140 of them have been granted refugee status in South Africa. And South
Gazans, right?
Africa already has a, sorry?
Gazans, you said, right?
Yeah.
Gazans, yeah.
So people from Gaza. And I mean, South Africa already has a porous northern border, and we know that a lot of other people from places like Pakistan and Bangladesh, so Islamic areas, have also entered the country. So I guess my very big question to you, Adele, being somebody who understands a lot about Islam and radicalism as well, is first of all, do such people pose a danger to a place like South Africa that hasn't dealt with this in the past, like Europe and Australia and Canada and the like?
Mm.
And if they do, how do you stop this? How do you stop the spread?
So first, I want to preface this by saying that my heart truly goes out to and breaks for anyone, any human that is caught in the crossfires of war and conflict. I feel absolutely, it sickens me that people are born into places or, like rural areas where they don't have access to running water, living under a dictatorship and an Islamic terrorist theocracy like in Gaza under Hamas, where they are brainwashed. They don't even know. They're not even given an opportunity to think for themselves because they're force fed this radical Islamic propaganda, and they end up becoming terrorists because of it. And so, yes, long story short is these individuals need to be de-radicalized, and because they haven't been, they do pose a national security threat to South Africa, any country that they will be in. There's a reason why Egypt doesn't want them, even though we share a border with them. There's a reason why Saudi Arabia doesn't want them. There's a reason why Jordan doesn't want them. Any country, they don't want to take these people in, even though they, some of them have long held the baton for the Palestinian people's, rights and whatnot, yet haven't really provided them with a substantive solution, because they know very well what the radical Islamic ideology is at the very core of what's been happening there. And I've seen what's happened in Europe. I have seen parts of Europe, which is, Europe is largely a Christian country, a Christian, sorry, not country, it's a continent. And so I see these Christian nations that have been, in some places, there are quite literal no-go zones in the UK, in London, suburbs. In Germany, there was the Pegida protests. In France, there are places where people almost exclusively are speaking Arabic in these places. And for me, I have to say, I'm a huge fan of assimilation. As an American, right, of Persian heritage and origin, whatever country you're going to go to, you respect the laws, you respect the culture, you respect the language, and you learn to speak it. You don't go to another country and try to impose Sharia law. Sharia law is completely incompatible with the West. And so, yes, long story short is I hope that I'm wrong about this, but unfortunately or fortunately, I'm usually not. I do see the small number of 100 of them, even what may seem like a wonderful way to help save them from, let's say, a situation that would be unfavorable to them. It's actually not going to end well long term. And I would hope that the government will keep a close eye on them to make sure they're not trying to radicalize and recruit other people and setting up some kind of, you know, operations that would advance what they were taught under Hamas. Unless they have sought refuge from Hamas, that's a whole different story, right? Then maybe they're
Sure.
willing to turn a page. And again, I feel bad for everyday Muslims because this is not representative of a lot of Muslims out there, and it's really sad that they get such a bad reputation in other parts of the world because of it. But it's really up to the Muslim diaspora to also stand up against radicalization, because the first victims of radical Islamic terrorism are usually Muslims themselves. And yeah, I hope there's a more porous border apparatus in place, and we'll just have to see.
Right, of course, of course. It's like you say. I mean, of course, we understand that the majority of Muslims are not terrorists, are not radicals. But unfortunately, like you say, when so many people are silent, it really doesn't do anything to sort of extinguish that spread of radicalism. So I think you make a very important point there. And yeah, I think you also make a very important point when it comes to border security. I mean, a lot of people don't want to view it that way. They love to sort of focus on the numbers. They love to sort of focus on, oh, it was just, a few people and then they'll stop. But like you said, you can even have a few people and the ideology spreads because that's what happens with ideologies. But just to, let's say, put a more positive spin on
Yeah.
things, we've discussed sort of the worst case scenario. So now let's discuss the best case scenario. Let's say that the Islamic regime falls, a better government steps in, Iran becomes more pragmatic, it becomes de radicalized, as I'm sure most Iranians actually want to happen. And ultimately, South Africa finds itself in a little bit of a strange space because its allies are gone. If you were the advisor to South Africa's Foreign Affairs Department, what would your advice be in that kind of a situation?
Normalize relations with Israel and the West.
Simple as that. Wow. And I noticed you specifically said Israel first. Is there any specific reason why?
Look, like it or not, anyone can try to rail against this, but America and Israel are eternal allies. And there's way too much technology, right, coming out of there. And, look, they don't even have to normalize with Israel as per the Abraham Accords, per se, right? They could just start pivoting away from what they've done for the past 47 years, and they could literally try to hold meetings, diplomatic meetings with Western nations. Um, America would be, I think, the preferable partner to do this with initially, and to see if there's a way to present some kind of a, official, let's say, doctrine of a commitment for guidelines, right, for basically goals over the course of 5-10 years, where they could literally change some of their policies and allow them to save their economy, frankly. Because that's, at the end of the day, it's what it comes down to. It's down to the economy. And if they're not willing to do that, they will continue to suffer, unfortunately, economic sanctions and things that will not benefit the economy and the bottom line, the people. But, as I said, if the Islamic Republic does change, and I have to point this out, Matthew, and I think you know it too. I think about 80% of the population in Iran is actually not supportive of the Islamic Republic. And they really are, I'd say a little bit less than that, are mostly secular, and it doesn't jive. And so any propaganda coming out from, let's say, the Bushra Sheikhs and the Kala Walsh and a few other ones that basically say otherwise, it's because they are pushing an agenda from the Islamic Republic itself. And I do think the role would be a safer place if the Islamic Republic does actually change from its theocratic underlying ideology to a more secular, democratic, republic type model. That said, I don't know. Rouhani and Ghalibaf have been floated as possible successors. I think that would also fine. If that's supposed to happen,
Sorry, just for the people who don't know, could you tell them who those people are?
yeah, absolutely. Hassan Rouhani, actually, he is a former president of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and he's seen as being a moderate, right? And so he and I think he's the some minister, Khalibah, foreign minister, I think he is. He's also been seen as being, part of that, as vice presidential kind of position or whatnot, because everyone else was killed or taken out, right, by the U.S. and
Sure.
Israel. And I think the smart strategic move is if that is what the people, let's see what they choose. But if that's what, for the temporary time, interim, they're planning on doing, then okay, that can be. But ultimately, I think that it would be smart for the West to work within that framework. Like, look at what happened in Venezuela. Delcy Rodriguez is a continuation of Maduro, but she is a little bit not, I want to say controlled, but it's easier to work with her because she understands there's certain demands that the West is having. That said, she could be there for another year or two until there's a referendum. Same thing with Rouhani and Ghalibaf. Maybe they'll have another referendum. And at that point, there could be people coming into Iran or people within Iran who will take place in an actual free and fair election. And then they can decide if they actually want to select someone else to lead the country. So, yeah, I think though it's going to be very important to actually drop the title of Islamic Republic from Iran's name. I think it's going to be very important, and that will ultimately also rest with whoever the new leadership will be.
Of course, of course. Well, Adelle, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak with me again. It's been great catching up. Certainly appreciate it. And yeah, for anybody who is interested in hearing a little bit more of what you have to say and what you're up to, where can people follow you?
Thank you so much for that. I am on social media, on Twitter, on X, at Adelle Naz, Adelle Naz, and I'm also on Substack now, so Adelle Nazarian. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. And it's so great to
Amazing.
be on.
Okay. No, perfect, perfect. And I'll be sure to post the links down in the description box below. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into the Power Pod. I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. And yeah, please be sure to follow Adelle for more of her content. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more of the Power Pod. And until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.